Hello, everybody. My name is Tom. Thank you for being with me today. And this is Vittorio Hosla. Vittorio Hosla speaks 18 languages. 18 languages. And he was my professor at university. And years after I graduated, I wanted to talk with him because I was really interested to know what he did to be able to do that, because I teach foreign languages. If he has something special that he does to learn languages, I really want to know. So I interviewed him, and one story really stuck with me. When he was 10 years old, he read a lot of Greek mythology, and then he taught himself ancient Greek. Now, why did that really stick with me beyond anything else that he talked about, anything else that he said? Because, well, really, that's a strange thing for a 10-year-old to do. That is a clear exception. I mean, if you think about it this way, Professor Hosla is the perfect student. He's the perfect student. He's one of those students where if you give him a chart, he'll say, well, thank you for this chart. I'll learn it. He'll go home, he'll learn the chart, he will come back the next day and try to use that information in his speech, in his writing. That is the ideal situation. But in reality, very few people will do that. Most 10-year-olds would do pretty much anything else other than teach themselves ancient Greek. Do you know what percentage of people start an online course and finish it to the end? 8%. That is a 92% dropout rate. A 92% dropout rate. If we teachers had those sorts of results, if we showed those sorts of results with students, we wouldn't have jobs. So we're better than that, but we realize that 8% of students, let's say, maybe they're not motivated to the level of Professor Hosla, but they're the motivated ones. 92% is everyone else, and that's really where the job lies. And as far as I see it, I want a simple framing here. And I look at students as having a choice. They have two choices to make that they can make every day, every moment of their lives. The first choice is English, to do English. The second choice is not English. Anything other than English. That's a decision that they make. Now, they're going to choose not to do English more often than they choose to do English, of course. But my question is, how do I get them to take action in some way? Action leads to results. Success isn't possible without action. So if we have motivation, if we consider motivation to be a large factor in leading to results, motivation doesn't work unless you actually do something about it. I want to learn Chinese. I've started to learn Chinese on 5 separate occasions, but I don't know Chinese because even though I want to learn it, even though I'm motivated to learn it, I don't act. I don't do what I need to do on a daily basis to grow. So our goal, rather than thinking about motivation, I want to think about action, because if the students do what they should do, they will grow. The question is, will they actually do it? And how do we encourage them to make that decision of English more often? More often. Because long-term motivation sounds great. Every student I talk to has an answer for why English. Why English? That's a question I tend to ask during testing, when I'm talking with a teenager like a later teenager or an adult, they could say, I want to get a better job. I want to work in this international company. And everyone has an idea of what beautiful distant future awaits them if they learn English, but does that actually lead to action? For most students, no. So the question is, what can we do and what should we do? And the goal has to be to lead to action, but what kind of action? High quality practice. What we're looking for is high quality practice. So I understand that the people I work with, regardless of their age, most of the time, they're going to choose to not do English. But when they make the decision to practice, to do English, to study, I want that to be high quality practice. And that requires concentration. It's action plus concentration. And if my students do what I ask them to do, whatever reason they have for doing it, they will improve at English. When I talked to Professor Hosla about all those languages that he knows, I wanted to know if he practiced in a specific way. Did he do something special? No. He studied the words in a chapter, he translated text. And as soon as possible, he was translating text from plays. He was translating novels, he was translating newspaper stories, and then he just tried. He tried to speak using what he had learned. Very traditional methods. Nothing special is in his methods, but what he did was he did it. He made the decision to do 1 chapter a day, and he learned Norwegian in 4 months. And this is where we can work with our own perspective and our students' perspective, because we work with the vast majority of students who are not motivated in a way that will lead to growth, that will lead to action, that leads to growth. And there are no band-aid solutions here. There are no quick fixes. There are no quick fixes for us. This has to be a consistent process that we apply systematically. But when we do it systematically, what we're showing the students is there are no tricks. There's no magic here. My research is based on understanding what the best students do. The best students, what do they do to learn English? Are they special? Seems like no. It seems like no. But they do things that other people don't see. So when a great student comes in to a lesson, they might say, I didn't study for the test. I didn't study for this test at all. And then they get a perfect score on the test. It's amazing. It seems miraculous, but what do those types of students do that differs from what everyone else does? Well, think about it. Your standard student has a lesson, and then they don't think about English until right before the next lesson when they do their homework. The best students, well, they're going to have the lesson. Then at the end of the day, they might remember what you did in the lesson and say, oh, yeah, I remember that. And they think about it a little bit. One study that I did showed that a lot of those students play with the language in their head. They take the new words, they take the new constructions, and they have conversations in their heads. They make up a situation and they respond to that situation. That is practice. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean that the practice doesn't happen. So what we do when we work with students, I want my students to understand there are no tricks. There are no tricks. You have to put in the effort to grow. There's nothing special happening here. Behind the curtain, there is effort, and effort leads to growth. And when you establish that understanding, they make effort, they achieve something, then you give them some sort of feeling of accomplishment. And that leads to the likelihood of continued efforts. That's the sort of system we're looking for. A system that will create a relationship of growth and trust between you and your students. Here's where we start. We start with a problem. The student has a problem. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. There's something to improve. Expectations. Here is where I know you can be. Here's when you can be there. I believe in you. I believe that you can do this because I know you. Here's how to get there. If you do A, B, and C, you will solve this problem right here. So I expect you to do that, do it, and then they do it. And they say, you know what? Great job. Great job. I told you you could do it. You're proving me right. I believe in you. You can believe in yourself, and then start back at number one. That is the process of communicating with students. And that process leads to a fruitful relationship that drives action in the process of learning in absence of motivation, regardless of who your students are. Because when your students do what you want them to do, and they grow because of it, and they have a clear understanding of that growth, they start to trust you. And that trust that your students have in you to show them the path forward, to help them understand how they can improve, that is your authority with your students. That is an authoritative relationship. When your students trust that you can deliver results, even when those results are not possible without their effort. That's what we're looking for today. Now, I have studied probably six or seven languages. One of those languages is Latin. And that's also one of the languages that Professor Hoslis speaks. He speaks Latin. He goes to Italy every year and teaches a philosophy course in Latin in Italy every summer. So, but I studied for 2 years and I don't remember Latin. I don't really remember it. There are a few words here and there, some rules, I generally have an idea of them, but I really remember some of the quotations that my 9th grade teacher gave us. And this is my favorite. If you don't know what harbor to seek, no wind is favorable. If you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where you want to end up, every direction is equally useless. Equally useless. And I just see this boat at sea with no shore in sight and no idea of where to go. No idea of what direction will lead towards any sort of goal because the goal is not clear. And I submit that our students feel that way a lot of the time. I really believe that because we know where we're going. We know what's coming next lesson. We know why we're doing what we're doing and what it's leading towards and what sort of skills students will have in a month, in 2 months, if everything goes according to plan. But our students don't know that, and they don't think about it. The best students, the most motivated students, do that on their own, more likely than not. But most students don't. And when you don't have direction that motivation provides, then it's hard to act a lot of the time because you feel like that just ship lost at sea. And this happens with students at all levels. A few years ago, I had a group, best group I've ever taught. They're C1, C2. So we're talking proficiency, high level, advanced group of teenagers. And I thought about this group. I thought, okay, great. This is going to be tough because these students are good and they know they're good. They're good and they know they're good. So how am I going to motivate them to be with me and like push forward this year? Because like in the end, what's the point if they're already great? If they're already great at English, they don't have any difficulties really in using the language and understanding. So I had a little plan. In the first lesson, I came in with a little speech ready to go. I said this, okay, guys, so how's school? How's English in school? Pretty easy? They said, yeah, it's easy. Yeah. Okay, I got it. School hasn't been difficult for a long time. What about like if you watch a YouTube video or a movie, a TV show, you get that? Okay, what about in daily life? In daily life, do you have any situations where you think, I don't know what to say? I don't know how to respond to this situation. I don't have enough words or phrases or structures. When's the last time that happened? They say, years ago. It's been a while. I said, yeah, I know. You're good at English. I know you're good at English. And guess what? That's not impressive anymore. You being good at English isn't impressive anymore because I know you're good at English. We're looking for greatness. I want you to be great at English. I want you to be at a level of an educated native speaker. That's our goal. That's what we're doing this year. I said, okay. All right. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean to be at the level of an educated native speaker? It means whatever you want it to mean to you. For each student in that room, they could have their own idea of what it means to be at the level of an educated native speaker. They can apply it to their situations, but either way, there is a concrete image of some goal that constitutes progress, that shows direction for everything that we do in the class. It provides a framework of value for everything that we do. It justifies anything I want to do. And if they have any questions about why we're doing this, I can always point to that framework right there, and I have direction. Now, this strategy works for any level, absolutely any level. I want to define overarching expectations, and these expectations need to clarify a point of meaningful growth for all of your students. And what that does is show, I believe in you and I have high expectations of you. I believe you can get there because that's why we're here. This is what I expect of you. This is where we're going. It shows that I believe in them, and it defines all future conversations. That's what I'm looking for. Why are we doing this? Because we have a goal. Now, I talked about high levels, but what about your students? What will work for your students, whatever level they are? Well, think about what represents a significant and obvious improvement for your students. Significant and obvious. So something that's really meaningful for them. So if I think about like vocabulary, this year I have some lower level students. We have a goal. I said, okay, guys, how many words do you want to learn this year? And they're like, 100. I said, oh, you mean 500, right? Okay, 500 words this year. And like, no, 500 words. So, okay, let's think about it. We have this many lessons, 500 words. Okay, we're talking about 9 words a lesson, 9 words every lesson. Can you do that? And they say, yeah, I can do that. I'm like, okay, so our goal, 500 words. And now what I'm able to do is we go over words. I collect them in a list. I hand out the list. And over time, they see that list growing. And I'll quiz them on it. I'll bring that back. We'll practice that. But they see clear progress, and they see a further direction that we're moving towards. Any level. That can work any level. Well, think about a skill. You can have at very low levels, like say beginner, elementary. I'll tell my students, I'll say, okay, your goal, we're going to speak for English in 5 minutes. No, for 5 minutes, excuse me. For 5 minutes, we're going to speak in English. And they say, what? How are we going to do that? I say, trust me, and we'll get there. In 1 month, you'll be able to speak in English for 5 minutes, or by the end of this period, you're going to speak in English for 5 minutes. Everything we do up to that point is moving towards that. Define a goal that shows your students that there is a direction and that they're moving in that direction, and they're going to be more likely to take effective action on the way there. Now, keep in mind, at lower levels, growth is more obvious. Because everything's new. All right, if I say, okay, what's this? I need a word for this. All right, I need a word for this. This is a pen. Okay, something new. Yesterday, I didn't know how to talk about the past. Today, I learned something new. I can talk about the past now. It's obvious at low levels. As you get better at something, as your students grow, it becomes more about nuance. So it might be about social skills. You hear a lot about soft skills. Whatever it is, it's about nuance in using the language, not just something new all the time. But you can define a sort of midterm direction for your students to reach for. And that provides direction and a sense of progress for the whole group. But sometimes it feels like there might be some barriers to that kind of progress. There might be some barriers to that kind of progress. I mean, think about this. If you put me at the bottom of a mountain and you say, hey, see the top? I say, yeah, barely. Climb it. Climb the mountain. Well, okay, first of all, I say, okay, I don't know where to start. And even if I hike all day, at the end of the day, I can still see where I started, and I'm almost equally far away from the peak of that mountain. Long-term goals are going to feel really far away a lot of the time. And it just seems kind of futile if along the way, I just keep seeing how far away that is, and there's nothing I can do. Well, we had a student last year in my school, 7 years old, and a beginner in the lowest level group for kids his age, where everyone started off at 0. No one really knew anything. No one had studied English before. But for some reason, he was, for reasons that I suspect certain reasons why this was, but he wasn't doing the work. He wasn't doing the work. He was saying, I don't know, with vocabulary that he should definitely know by this point. He wasn't really paying attention like he could and should. When the other students were trying to use what they learned, he wouldn't or just wouldn't interact. So we came up with the plan. So after a lesson, his teacher asked him for help. Hey, Vova, can you help me carry this stuff to the teacher's room? And he helped her carry the things to the teacher's room. And then she sat him down and said, okay, Vova, this is for you. She had a little booklet. It said, top secret passport. And it had a stamp on it. Very official. And she said, Vova, this is your passport. No one knows about it. No one knows about it except for you, me, and Tom. I was in the corner. I nodded. This passport will have a goal for you. Right here, I'm going to write a goal for the lesson, for the next lesson. If you achieve that goal, I'll sign it and you get a stamp. And then we do another goal. All right? Okay, so it's just you, me, and Tom, and I'm going to tell Tom about it. I nodded again. He looked at me. Your first goal. 5 minutes, don't speak Russian. Don't speak Russian for 5 minutes in the next lesson. What happened in the next lesson? Well, the teacher had a little timer going on her phone, and he spoke Russian. What was his reaction? He spoke Russian. He looks at her. She turned it off. She stopped the timer and started it over again. He started paying attention. He focused. He concentrated on what he could improve, and he did it. And after the lesson, she sits down with him and she says, hey, nicely done, Vova. I knew you could do it. And I saw you do that. I know you can do this next one. Next time, 12 minutes, no Russian. 12 minutes, no Russian. I said, oh, that's tough. Yeah, I know, but I know you can do it. I know you can do it because I saw how you work today. I'm sure you can do this. And what happened was, over time, he was doing full lessons with no Russian. He was partaking in all the activities. He was working, but working in all the activities didn't start with ready, set, work in all the activities now. First, it was the pronunciation activities where we're repeating after me and doing chants. Do those with me. Next lesson, do those. And she built it up over time. And this little booklet that he had showed concrete progress the entire time. Concrete, sure progress where she could point to it and say, look how far you've come. Look how far you've come. This is about not saying, go to the mountain, go to the top of the mountain. Go to the top of the mountain and get there, figure it out. This is building the steps and creating a sense of progress. Rather than saying, here's where you are and here's where you need to be, she showed him how to build the stairs. And every single step was a celebration of progress, step-by-step progress. And that understanding helped solidify the value of his efforts. And every once in a while, you look down the mountain and you say, wow, look how far I've come. That is how we can work with students on a daily basis in a way that creates value in the process of learning, which is really just taking effective action, practicing. So what constitutes improvement for your students? Speaking more loudly. I have that problem that I'm working with this year. Speak more loudly. It's a win when that student speaks a little bit louder, when I don't have to shout across the room, say, I can't hear you from there. A student who is weaker, who's less likely to speak, more hesitant when it comes to using what you've taught, pronunciation. You can create a small step that gives you the opportunity to praise that effort, which makes it more likely they're going to take the next step to getting to where you actually want them to be. Intonation, another option. Sometimes you can praise the weakest student in the class for good intonation, even compared to their peers. Think about this. What about exams? Let's say I have a student who has 1 out of 8 on a section of a practice exam. Do you know what's better than 1 out of 8? 3 out of 8. That is improvement. When I track that, I can show the student you are getting better. Now, what if you're really having a lot of trouble with this part of the exam? Like, let's say there's a reading section. There's a reading section and you have 5 questions in the reading. Before answering the questions, here's what I want my student to do. Number 1, where is the answer? For number 1, what paragraph do you think contains the answer? So you think, okay, number 1, I think it's paragraph 1. Number 2, I think it's paragraph 2. Number 3 is also paragraph 2. Number 4 is paragraph 5. And number 5, paragraph 6. They could get all of them wrong. But if I say, you know what though? 4 of these questions, you knew exactly where to look. You are closer to being where you want to be. And what we're doing with this sort of communication is just establishing this idea that you are moving in the right direction. You are making progress. Because when a student who lacks the motivation, the 92%, when you have one of those students who lacks the motivation that the top 8% have, then they might see that top 8% and say, I just can't do it. Something's wrong with me. I just can't. But in reality, if they act, they will grow. And we're making it more likely that they will act. Now, there are a lot of factors at play here. One of those is your belief in your students. In the Pygmalion study, these scientists came to a teacher and they said, hey, teacher, we're going to give your students a test. And this test will show which of your students in the class have the most potential to grow and improve in the near term, very soon. That wasn't true. They were lying to the teacher. In fact, it was just a random sort of basic test that they gave, and they chose 3 students at random, Billy, Sandy, and Mindy. They said, okay, teacher, Billy, Sandy, and Mindy are your students who are most likely to grow and improve in the near term. And then they came back a little while later and gave the test, and guess who improved more than anybody else? Billy, Sandy, and Mindy improved more than anybody else. Why? Well, because the teacher acted differently towards them. She was more patient, more encouraging, gave them more time. When you believe in your students, they are more likely to show results. And when you believe in your ability to make a difference, you're more likely to make a difference. That's the concept of self-efficacy. Self-efficacy. That's Bandera, and it's Woolfolk if you want to see it applied to teaching. Anita Woolfolk. People who believe that they can make a difference tend to make a difference. People who don't believe they can make a difference do not make a difference. And the same goes for students. If they don't believe they can, they won't. They won't. But what we're doing with this process is creating a situation in which you have proof that they can. You have proof. All right, guys. Just a quick note. I will come to questions at the end. So what you're doing is you're establishing and confirming your belief in your students and your students' ability to believe in themselves. And what that allows for is an effective process and an effective relationship with your students. Because it's all about perspective a lot of the time. A lot of the time, it's just this understanding of what is possible, of what potential there actually is in a student. I mean, think about it. Do you know how many people in the world speak a language? All of them? There hasn't been a culture discovered in the world that doesn't understand the need or doesn't have a will to create a language to communicate, whatever that language is. But we have to understand what's possible in the situation, and we have to acknowledge that students will choose not English most of the time. I had a student 2 or 3 years ago, an interesting one. So in my school, I like to take the ones that are a little more interesting to kind of work with. And he was having a little trouble in his group, so I started doing some lessons with him, just individually instead of him being in the group. And one time he came to me and he said, at the lesson, he said, "Oh, I didn't do my homework." He said, "I didn't have time." And I'm thinking, "What? You're 11. You didn't have time? What are you doing?" All right, but I asked him. I said, "Okay, today is Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. Our last lesson was Thursday. What did you do Thursday after the lesson?" Okay, and after that? "What about Friday? What did you do on Friday?" All right. "Saturday? Sunday?" Okay, that's Sunday. What about Monday? So it's Tuesday. What did you do today before the lesson? Okay. So let's look at the homework. How long does this exercise take you? It's like 10, 15 minutes. I said, "Okay, look at your schedule. Where can you actually do this? Can you find 10 or 15 minutes in your schedule to do this?" And the answer is clearly yes. Clearly yes. That's a possibility. That's perspective. And I want my student to understand that he's making a decision to not do English. He's making a decision that, you know what, that's not what I'm going to do right now. That is going to define his efforts. Because if he has 15 minutes of quality practice, that's what's valuable to me between lessons. I'm increasing the likelihood that he will actually do it by clarifying action. When he understands what he needs to do, how long it will take, and then he shows me when he will do it, that will increase the likelihood that they will actually do it, that they will dedicate the time. And I also want to think about how they do it. I'm having conversations with my students nowadays, like, when you do your homework, do you listen to music? Do you, listen, like watch YouTube at the same time or something like that? Don't. All right? Turn that off and just give me 10 minutes. Give me a high quality 10 minutes. And this week I even said, high quality 10 minutes. If you don't finish the activity in 10 minutes, that's fine. But whatever you finish in 10 minutes, I want it to be high quality. You really concentrate on it. That clarifies the action for the students. And it helps them understand what they're doing and when they will actually do it. And then beyond that, do you ever have students just totally disorganized? They're just totally disorganized. There's a lot of junk in their folders, and maybe their books are full of papers too. Well, I started this year or two ago with my students. Now we're doing it in the school, where just take a few minutes of class time. I say, okay, I want 2 piles, useful, not useful. 2 piles, go through all your things. They put it in useful, not useful. Okay, we have the not useful piles. Write your name on it and give it to me, because I want to understand what you think is valuable, what you think you're already finished with, what you don't need anymore. Now, that kind of underscores the idea that they show confidence that they know what we've gone over, but also beyond that. Let's say they're going to be doing their work. They're going to be doing their homework, and there's some notes that would be very helpful that I want them to reference while they do their work. Or there's a vocab list that I want them to reference. Well, they're not going to find it if it's surrounded by garbage. Streamlining and organizing the students in terms of their effort will make practice more effective. So that when they choose to do English, that action will be more effective, and it's really worth spending class time on it, from my perspective. That's something that before I would balk at. I would never want to do that. I would say, class time should be focused on practice and growing, but what makes work inside and outside of the classroom more effective is actually a very worthy way to spend your time in class. Because this decision right here, the students are making, is a clear one. This is why I'm so skeptical about a lot of apps that you have for learning a language. I mean, think about it. On your phone, on the typical student's smartphone, let's say, what is more interesting and more entertaining than studying English? Basically everything. Basically everything, I think we can say. TikTok, Instagram, VK, Facebook, a random article, a YouTube video, a cat falling. Maybe there's a YouTube video, just a compilations of cats falling down and tripping. No? That is more likely to hold their attention and win their attention when it comes to their free time, when it comes to using their phone. They get a notification, new video on TikTok. They're not going to be looking at English at that point. Most of them won't. But when they make a decision to study English, I want that to be effective practice, effective study. And this really defines a lot of what's difficult for both students and teachers, I think, because here's the deal. If you have students who are more motivated than their peers in their class, at the beginning of the year, they're probably a little bit better. They're a little bit better, but they grow faster. So over the course of the year, that gap grows, and in 2 or 3 years, you're teaching totally different levels in the same classroom. There's an increasing gap in ability just because those students make not only the effort that you ask of them, but often work outside of that. Now, focusing on the distant future, let's think, okay, in 15 years, young child, you could work in an international company and make a good salary and support your family. Is that really going to motivate a lot of our students? That always seems like it's tomorrow. It's not even tomorrow. If you tell me something is next month, I'll be like, I have time. I don't need to do that today, really, because I have time. What's the hurry? Think about exam preparation. When a student comes to you and they say, I have to prepare for an exam. You say, when's the exam? 2 months. And you think, good Lord, 2 months? But this is something that a lot of people prepare for over years, and you're giving me 2 months to work with you on this? That's just natural, though. That's just natural. There's a lack of a sense of urgency for most people when they think about the distant future. And in general, is that a future they can believe in? I mean, a lot of the time, it's just, a distant dream that is probably more unlikely than it is likely for most people. But here's the deal. It's hard to learn. It's hard to learn. And when a student says, oh, this is hard, you know what I like to say? Do you know what was hard for you before? Hello, my name is, I'm from Russia. That was hard before. Is that hard now? I say, no. Well, do you know why not? Because you worked before and now it's easy. Of course it's hard now. If it wasn't hard now, it wouldn't be valuable. We wouldn't be doing it. And I know you can do it because I believe in you. I know you can do this because I have seen you grow in the past. And if it's been a long process of us working together, you have seen how you can grow. If you can do that, you can do this. Emphasizing that idea of a growth mindset. I have high expectations for you. And throughout this process, we're creating situations that prove you right, to have these expectations. So we have high expectations in the long term, and in the short term, they keep proving you right, that look what you did and look what you got as a result. You see this growth. Look where we were a month ago. Look where we were a week ago. You're even better than that. And when you see actions that are contrary to what you want from them, this is a good thing about non-judgmental punishment. So it's not punishment. I had a student, a teenager, he had his head on the desk. First thing, I'm like, okay, great. This is what I'm dealing with today. Head on the desk. And I said, okay, guys, let's get going. I asked him to do something. So I'm like, hey, man, is everything okay? He's like, yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, tired. I can see you're tired. Yeah, it's fine. I have hard days too, but we still have the same goals. And he just emphasized those high expectations. And he told me, eventually he told me later in the class, I slept for 3 hours last night. I stayed up till 4 a.m. doing this project. I say, oh, that's tough. It's going to be harder today. Do what you can, because I know you can. I know you can. I know it's going to be harder, but we still have the same goals. And what that does is allow me to keep framing the relationship based on achievement. And throughout this whole process, I'm looking back and giving perspective on improvement, perspective on growth, because teaching is not a factory. It's not a factory. If I do the same thing, the same exact thing with different students, I should anticipate different results. Beyond that, I'm busy. I work a lot. I'm tired. And I don't have necessarily the time to be overly personal with every single person I work with, to define exactly what their eventual goals are and why English is important for those specific particular goals. But in the end, action leads to results. Motivation that isn't followed by action doesn't lead to results. And if I give the students direction, if I give them a sense of progress and they act, they will learn regardless of their level of motivation. I don't like golf. I think it's really boring, and I'm terrible at it. But I do know this one golfer. This is Brandt Snedeker. He is top 100 in the world. But back when I was in high school, he was really coming up. And at one point, he was fourth in the world. And I wouldn't know about him if it weren't for the fact that he went to my high school. But I wouldn't know that if it weren't for my math teacher, Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell was the golf coach when Brandt Snedeker was studying in my high school. And he was the coach when Brandt Snedeker played golf in high school. And one of my classmates asked, what was it like to coach Brandt Snedeker? What was it like to coach Brandt Snedeker? And I don't remember much about calculus, but I do remember this. Mr. Caldwell looked at that student and said, I didn't teach that boy a thing. He learned nothing from me. And that really rings true for me, because our best students, no one judges us based on our best results. Our best results aren't really what defines our teaching in the eyes of others for the most part. Those are the 8%. Those are the 8%. They might even be a smaller percent who will teach themselves English, whether anyone likes it or not. But for me personally, the bad lessons stick with me much longer. I can tell you in detail what it was like to teach present perfect continuous for the first time years and years ago. In detail, that embarrassing moment. I remember that much better than I remember a good class from last week. I would have to look back at my notes to remember what I did with my classes last week. But the bad ones stick. They stick. That's stressful. And beyond that, we're going to be judged based on the bad results and the average results much more than we're going to be judged by the exceptions. Who coached Brandt Snedeker in high school? No one cares. No one thinks of Mr. Caldwell as a great golf coach. Who taught Vittorio Hosla, Spanish? Who was his Spanish teacher? Doesn't matter because he is considered the exception. That's how we are looked at as educators. That's just the reality of it. So what we're looking for is a system that allows us to lead more students towards progress, that gives them direction, that motivates action rather than relying on motivation. There's a lot of noise that goes on. If I have a classroom, there's a lot of present elements in that classroom. Do my students' friends speak English? If my students' friends speak English, that might motivate my student. What if it's very important for the parents that the kid speaks English? Well, maybe the kid wants to rebel against the parents. What's the way to rebel? To not try so hard in English. I can't rely on all of these outside factors to help me move my student forward. So instead, I'm going to strengthen this triangle right here, this relationship. How I digest English, how I prepare the English for my student affects how my student looks at English. How I relate to my student affects how effective my student is in practicing English. And in that triangle, I want to create a sense of value, a sense of progress, so that everything else outside of that, everything negative that takes away from that progress, fades to the background. There's a sense of progress and a sense of value in the process of learning. And that's how I develop an authoritative relationship where my students trust that what I say will happen with their effort. We're building the steps up the mountain, where I say consistently throughout the year, in different ways, of course, before you couldn't, now you can. I told you you could. I told you you could, but you're not good enough yet. Here's what's next. Here's where we're moving. And throughout that process, I'm saying, there's where we're going. Those long or midterm goals, and look where we've come from. And that's how I work with unmotivated students. Direction over motivation and praise of effort across the board. All right, everybody, I'll answer your questions now. I have some time, and I understand there are some questions. Yeah, but just for these last few seconds here, let me just leave this up for a second. You can take down my email if you have any questions or anything like that. That's the best way to contact me. I am on social media, but very rarely. I've been on Facebook in probably 2 months, 3 months. VK, I haven't been on in probably 2.5, 3 weeks. And Instagram, almost never check it. So best way to contact me is definitely by email. All right, I'll go ahead and close that if you got it down. And I've got some questions here in chat. Let's do it. All right, so I got some questions ahead of time. I'll go to the ones that are that came during the talk first, simply because I can probably answer that when the talk is more immediate in your mind. See what's going on. So, based on your experience, do you think that lack of motivation is a problem that is endemic in students of a particular age? Are there solutions that you use that are age specific? So endemic in students of a particular age, no. In general, motivation isn't something that I trust, because there is a motivation to start English. The motivation to follow through is more likely to be lacking. The motivation to follow through. The reasons for starting to study English or studying English in general are much less likely to lead to daily efforts. Now, there are different names that people give that sort of thing. There's stick-to-itness, follow through, grit is another way to say, to work through those difficulties. I don't really do that either. I don't follow through with those sorts of things either, because if I'm talking about like a personal characteristic like grit, I can't make my students grittier. I can't change how their parents speak to them or spoke to them at a young age that developed their idea of what a growth or a fixed mindset is in terms of intelligence or who they are. So instead of that, I create processes within studying that builds a relationship over time. So I would not say that it is endemic in students of a particular age. And are there solutions you use that are age specific? I use the same sort of process the entire time. It's the same process. That's why I like that's why it's systematic, because this is applicable to students of any age and any ability level. Even just talking about how many vocab words you've learned, that is a big deal. Timing how long students can speak for, even just counting how many words they wrote in a little sort of profile of a monster that they made, that can show ability and really give value to their efforts. So this is something that I use in all ages, all levels, and we use in my school consistently. Okay, so do you find that students who are unmotivated to study English are not motivated to study anything at all? Do they need to be motivated to change their attitude to studying in general, or can the problem be solved locally just for English? So it depends. It depends. I mean, it depends on where you go. So there is the best school, the school with the best results in Russia is in St. Petersburg. And I'm always curious about that, because I work with the Olympiad Committee in St. Petersburg. And my question is, the fact that that school has a lot of students in the final levels of the English Olympiad, it's a math and science school. Does that mean that the English program is really amazing, or is it that type of student? And there is this idea that selectivity at a level of examinations, entrance exams, will put students in this school that are actually more motivated to do everything, to study everything. But it just depends. Well, I went to to clarify, I do a lot of work with universities here. And at universities, the students are much more motivated than, for example, at the College of Water Resources where I went. And because the College of Water Resources, they think, why would I need English? Why would I need English? But they study very hard to be great plumbers, great electricians, because that's why they're there. They're there to become professionals. So I do not work on motivation as a whole. I work on increasing the likelihood of practice, of action, and high quality action from the students by seeping the process in value so that they feel valued within the process of learning. And that's motivated to practice. I guess you say I'm motivating them to practice, but it's not like a motivational speech or anything like that. It's direction, and it's this idea of accomplishment, creating opportunities for accomplishment in moving in a certain direction in place of motivation. Because I can't change who the students are, what their goals are, who their parents are, and how they were raised, everything like that. But the fact is, if they do what they should do, they will get better. Okay, so what tools, softwares, apps do you use to demonstrate their progress to the students? How time consuming is it for you to track and present their progress? It depends on what you're tracking. I use paper and a pencil, and then I will transfer it to my lesson plan. I do my lesson plans on Google Docs, Word, essentially. It doesn't take that much time. So I can just tell the students, last time, so I did small talk with my groups. They're pre-intermediate. They're like 12-year-olds. Let's say 11 to 13 is that group, are those groups. I'm saying last time we talked for 5 minutes, now we're up to 8 minutes. And that's just an easy thing to add to my lesson plan. It doesn't take much time. For the words, I just have an Excel sheet, a Google spreadsheet is what I use. And then I just add the words from every last lesson and print them off and give them to the students. I'm very low tech in the teaching for plenty of reasons, but that's another talk. Good question. It doesn't take that long. Have you ever had students that you had to stop teaching because you couldn't motivate them no matter what you tried? I find those students interesting in terms of motivation and everything like that. Now, I've started to look at this a little bit differently. I don't stop working with students who are unmotivated. Now, I do have that luxury if I need to. I lean more towards the idea that, if you're not going to try, I'll tell the parents, this is a waste of your money. This is a waste of your money. Don't come to the school because your kid's not trying in this case. But I can do that because it's my school. It's my school. I can make those sorts of decisions, which I've started to make more recently. But until let's say this semester, I never really made that call. So this year, the only students we've stopped working with was because of behavior. When they would work pretty well, but their behavior detracted from the rest of the class, but not because of motivation. You're welcome for the lecture, Elena. Thank you for the question. How would you recommend to motivate a student who is not interested in learning English if it's just a school curriculum for this student? Same idea of progress. Give them direction, give them progress. So even just counting the words that they've learned. If you're doing YEGE or OGE prep, those different exams, same deal where you keep track of their scores and you understand where they're moving and what represents progress for them. Because again, if they're getting, let's say, 43 out of 100, 50 is better. 50 is better, and that's reason for praise. It's still not good. It's still not what you're looking for, but the same sort of process. So these are the questions that were pre-submitted. So we got from Gleb. Do you know of any tech solutions that facilitate our work with adult students that are chronically demotivated? I've heard of Classcraft, but it's for K-12. I don't use tech solutions in general, honestly. I don't. Now, I find a lot of that to be attempts at entertainment and gamification. And gamification is a behavioral way of impacting student work. So what you're doing is trying to manipulate behavior by, in some ways, pressuring students to say, oh, you're going to lose your points, but we froze your streak. That's the Duolingo style. Or it could, that's behavioral. What I'm looking for is systemic. Now, by systemic, I mean that we're creating a system and a relationship with students that I reinforce with every interaction with my students. It's throughout every interaction with the students. It's a part of every lesson and a part of every conversation. And what that does is motivate behavior that leads to results. What I find with a lot of the materials out there that are available in tech and everything like that, what I find is it is behavioral approaches to solving problems that really doesn't go very far methodologically, to say the least. They don't really improve what's out there. I mean, they work hard, no offense, but that's my call. I don't use much tech. So this is from Victoria. She is a teacher at a private language school in Moscow, in the Moscow region. I've been to private language schools in the Moscow region. Maybe I've seen you before. Cool. Not hello, if I have. Working with a number of classes and often have to do with unmotivated learners, especially teenagers and pre-teenagers. Okay, so what's interesting about that, you say that you're in the Moscow region at a private school, probably wealthy students. Wealthy students are often very difficult to deal with. And that's where it's always going to have to do with the personal relationship. So it's often the case when parents want them to learn English, but the children do not really put in the effort that they need because they're overloaded with school and a number of extra activities. Okay, they don't see practical use in learning a foreign language in their everyday life and often have a lot of problems with concentration and memory. I'd like to know what's the best way to work with them as a teacher to motivate them. Same process. You can give them perspective on how long it actually takes. You can go through scheduling. They can create a plan of when they're going to do it. That I stole from a study that they did with people who were working on overcoming their heroin addiction. So they were in a program to help heroin addicts re-enter society, and they were working on CVs. Putting together, and the homework was to put together a resume. With one group, they said, please put together your resume over the weekend. And then they came back, I think it was 15% of them had their resume ready to go on the Monday. 15%, so 85% failure rate. In this case, with the second group, what they did was they said, okay, write down when you are going to put together your CV, when you're going to write your resume. And it was like, so on Saturday, I will wake up, eat breakfast, and after I brush my teeth, I'm going to sit down at the kids' table and write my resume. And all of them did it. Every single one of them followed through on that. And these are people who are struggling with something very difficult, plenty of distractions. But understanding and making a plan for when they will do something, especially with a perspective on what they need to do and how long it will take, will help motivate action, And when they grow because of that action, and you give them perspective that, look how you've grown, they're more likely to trust you and follow through later on. Okay, so we got question 3. So Vasily, so he lacks motivation himself, and he tried the technique of working together with peers, and it helps him more. What technique to use? So in this case, I find out that working with peers, that sort of motivation, that can help. It really depends on the individual. It can help. It can be motivating. For some people, it'll be more demotivating. That's going to be individual in terms of how do you like to study? I never like to study with other people. Like if I was studying for a test, I never wanted to do it in a group. But in general, if you're doing it for yourself, then the idea would be to have a point where you want to be. You have to choose a direction for yourself and then define the steps you need to get there. And when you define those steps, it could be learning this many vocab words. It could mean, speaking for this many minutes in this situation, trying to use this form in whatever speaking club you're a part of. That would be the way to go in using these same techniques that we talked about. It's just a huge advantage when you're working with a teacher, because a teacher knows where you're going. And with a teacher, it's just a lot easier to define those steps and create value for those steps by clarifying what an effective endpoint will be when a student achieves growth. All right, guys, good questions. Thank you very much. All right, anything else? That's it for me. I was supposed to give a heads up on the last question. I totally forgot. I apologize. But in general, this process, I want to give you a general idea of how to flexibly respond to any situation, regardless of where you work. If you work, I talked with a teacher who's working in Africa with 75 different students in one classroom, all different levels. This should work. This should work there. It should work with individual students. It should work in a public school, private language center, whatever. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. Have a wonderful Wednesday. And yeah, keep in touch if you have any questions. And thanks to AMC for inviting me. Very cool thing to be a part of. See you guys around.